Hello and welcome to Miss Clark Reads to You. We are in Deathwatch by Rob White and we are in chapter 5. We're going to start at the bottom of page 61 and then we're going to finish chapter 5 and quickly look at some of the words and literary elements that I mapped out. So on the bottom of 61, this is when Ben had just been shot at for trying to go to the catch basin that he had noticed, and Maddox shot at him to prevent him from getting to the catch basin. So Ben is on his way back up to this the summit of this mountain that is in the middle of the bowl that Ben is trapped in, and that's where we are. Ben made a helpless gesture with his arms and turned away from the basin, walking slowly, picking his way. As he bent back to the top of the range, he studied the bighorn sign, hoping to find another trail that would lead him to another water hole. But, except for the trail he had followed, there was only sign of aimless wanderings. Near the summit, he sat down in the shade on the western side of an outcrop of stone. Outcrop of stone, summit meaning the top of the mountain, the sharpest point. This is just an outcrop. This isn't an outcrop means a jetting out on the top of where he is. He found with his fingers that his face had stopped bleeding. The flesh around the cut was painful now, and he could tell that it was swelling. His feet were in bad shape, old cuts broken open, new cuts still bleeding. The slow, small, irritating desert flies arrived and swirled around him. They were so stupid, so suicidal, but killing them only seemed to make them increase in number. They wandered in and out of his wounds, or sat and preened their wings, or even bred, flitting in his blood, and there was very little he could do. They had made a home on him. So all the desert flies are flying around his wounds, making a hole in the blood, breeding. This is some sharp imagery of death, because, as you know, flies go around things that are dead. The jeep was moving. To Ben, it seemed as though the cloud of light brown dust was pushing the white body of the jeep forward, bouncing it along the desert. About a mile from the mountains where Ben was, an old eroded butte rose at an angle from a low-cut terrace. Ben watched Maddox force the jeep up the sloping wall of the terrace, and once on it, turned the jeep so that it was facing him. Maddox got out, and although Ben could not see exactly what Maddox was doing, it appeared that he was slowly scanning the area ahead of him. So, in my image, I have the jeep heading towards the low-cut terrace of this butte, this outcropping of stone, and he turns the front of the jeep to face Ben, and now Ben is going to describe what he sees and probably what Maddox sees. Ben had studied that butte and cut terrace in the moonlight, realizing that its location made it a serious threat to anything he might want to do. He had hoped that Maddox, without the panorama view, the extended view, the flat view, the scanning view that Ben had hoped that the panorama, without the panorama he had, would not recognize the advantage the terrace would give him, meaning would give Ben. So right now, Ben is thinking he needs to get to that terrace, that low-cut terrace in front of that butte. It depressed Ben to see the jeep parked there. Maddox, now back under the shelter of the roof, invisible in the heavy shadow. So there's a shadow coming down off this butte, and Maddox inside. From the terrace, Maddox could see the entire south side of Ben's little mountain range, from the eastern to the western end. He could also see the wide stretch of open desert between Ben's small range and high ranges in the distance, which surrounded this egg-shaped bowl of desert. From Maddox's vantage point, the only area he could not see was to the north of the mountain range. The north of the mountain range. This is the only part that Maddox can't see. A man with sufficient water and food, with clothing to protect him from the sun, with good boots on uninjured feet and sunglasses to keep his eyes from burning out, could escape from Madix by simply going down the north side of the mountains and hiking out across the desert, heading due north so as to keep the mountains between him and Madix. An injured man, almost naked, with no water and no food, could not venture into that northern area. For at least 100 miles, there was nothing but open desert, worn and gently rolling, the surface of the ground littered with small rocks and stones, with here and there the sprouts of the tenacious and enduring desert plants. There would be no catch basins of water out there. There were not even any barrel cactus, the water-soaked flesh of which could keep a man alive, provided he could somehow cut through the leather tough skin of the plant. So one of the things that my students talked about when we were reading earlier was, why can't Ben cut into a cactus and eat what's in a cactus? And this is a really good point. Because if you infer, it says, if he could somehow cut through the leather tough skin of the plant. So that skin, he doesn't have any tools. Well, right now he does have his slingshot. I don't know, that might be a possibility to use that to cut through the leather tough skin of a cactus. But that would be a problem for Ben. To drink the water of a cactus. He's got to get through that skin. To the north was the only route he could take and not be seen by Madix. But as things stood now, with almost 24 of his 48 hours of life already gone, he could not survive 10 of those 100 long miles. Ben realized that Madix must have come to the same conclusion, and so Madix sat watching through the binoculars, knowing that Ben had only 3 choices: to stay where he was, some water near him, but made unavailable to him by the hornet. So when I'm doing my interesting facts, this is a good place to write the things that Ben can do. Okay, so he can stay where he is, near some water, but unavailable because of Madix going to shoot at him. Okay, with the hornet. That's what the hornet is, the gun. He could come down from the mountains and start walking the desert to the east. Madix would not even have to move the Jeep, but could just sit there on the cut terrace and watch Ben die somewhere out in those empty 65 miles. So 65 miles to get to that mountain range. Or Ben could come down and walk to the west, naked, with no water. There was a small difference between 65 miles and 35 miles. So 65, 35, doesn't matter, Ben's naked. Almost numb to the aggravation of these flies walking around on his face, Ben looked across through the heat-shimmering air at the white Jeep. It seemed poised and ready to go, to follow him, grinding along slowly in 4-wheel drive. I just realized a word, aggravation. So I have my tone as methodical. So meaning that Ben's attitude is he's trying to plan out what he can do, but we could also say that his tone is aggravated. Okay? So what we're seeing here is he's just very frustrated with the circumstance that he has. And as we move forward in the plot, we're going to hear that Ben's lived in the desert his whole life. He knows what to do. He knows how to survive in the desert. That's why he's aggravated, because Madix has prevented him from doing what he knows how to do. So, and again, we're going to pick up the mood. The mood is always created by the setting. It's fatal. And we heard how many miles. We heard Madix sitting there and can trail. Ben, whatever choice he makes, fatal, deathly. Mechanics, machines, supplies were not part of this game. In the final analysis, even the guns were not part of it. Sitting in the hot, still heat, the flies crawling endlessly on him, Ben felt everything dropping away. He thought of search parties he had been on looking for tourists who had left the main highways to do a little rock bounding or have a picnic. People allowed some small accident like a stalled car or a broken axle to kill them. He remembered a little family of 4, parents and 2 children who died in the desert within sight of the highway. That family had done everything wrong. When their car stalled and they couldn't get it started again, they walked away from it, leaving 5 or 6 gallons of dirty but drinkable water in the radiator. They had walked away from the shade it could give them, walked away from the evidence of trouble the search party would look for, and they had walked away in the daylight, in the sunlight, in the killing heat. When Ben found them, it almost made him cry to see how the mother had smeared lipstick on the faces of her children in a futile effort to keep the sun from burning the flesh off them. Ben had always thought he could survive in this desert he knew so well, as long as he could move. He could move. If you called stumbling on those torn feet moving, he could move for about 24 hours more. That was all. All night long, he had hoped that with the coming of day, Madik would realize he was making a fatal mistake. That to kill Ben out here would be far more dangerous than confessing to the accident and taking his chances with a jury. Now, Ben admitted to himself that Madik, as intelligent as he was too vain to give up. Vain and conceited. I want to add the word vain to my vocabulary. So, because these are good words, vain and conceited. We're going to look this word up, vain, to see exactly what it means. So what for our vocabulary is summit, panorama view, lacerated, that's the state of Ben's feet, the butte, which is this huge outcropping mountain in the middle, tenacious, reconciliation, vain and conceited. Most of us know what conceited is, but I'm going to look up vain. The word imagery, and we have some metaphors here. They had made a home on him. So a metaphor is a direct comparison. Ben's cuts are a home for the flies. And our new characters are the family who died in the desert. Great. Madik would tell a simple, convincing story. Ben had killed the man. And when Madik had insisted on reporting it to the authorities, had tried to kill him too. But Madik had escaped to the jeep and made his way back. Madik would tell it well, Ben decided. All the details would fit. He might even go so far as to wound himself, to make it more convincing. Madik would see to it that all the evidence supported him. The old man, ruined by vultures by the time they found him, would be wearing his clothes again, and his boots and hat. The 2 hornet slugs would be easy to find. Ben would also have his clothes on. Madik would find him where he had at last dropped and would dress him and equip him with empty canteens and gun and food. It was too late now for any reconciliation. Too late to just walk off this mountain and go to Madik and beg for his life. So in this chapter and in the prior chapter, Ben still had hope that Madik would change his mind. And now Ben's methodical attitude has made him realize this man is vain and conceited. He can't be reasoned with. He fought back the fear. As long as there was water on this mountain, he told himself, I'm not dead. Tonight he planned, when the moon goes down, I'll go back to that catch basin. To keep Madik from seeing me, I'll crawl all the way there on my stomach. But I'll get there. With the dry heat pressing in on him from every direction, Ben relaxed against the outcrop and forced himself to stop the squirrel cage thinking, to empty his mind and sleep. And that's where I got my title from, Squirrel Cage Thinking. A squirrel trapped in a cage, or he's also called it the bowl. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to reading the next chapter along with you. I hope you have a very nice day.